body has been discovered by dog walkers in woods near Warrington,
The scene
Cheshire.
suggests that the victim had been stabbed multiple times.
Police
and that
are
two
appealing for
people
witnesses who were in Linear Park, Culcheth, to come forward.
The knife attack had been frenzied and ferocious. The police and paramedics tried desperately to save her, but at 4:02 p.m, the victim is pronounced dead.
Welcome to Crime with Manny Haribo. Today, the case that we're going to talk about happened just a few miles away from my home early last year. The sense of sadness and outrage in my community was palpable and remains even to this day. In the UK, if you're under the age of 18 and you go through the court system, you have the right to anonymity. This right can actually be waived by the courts if they find that there's a significant impact on the community. Now, this happens in very rare cases. In fact, only 3 or 4 times has this happened in the past 60 years. And this, unfortunately, is one such case. Eddie Ratcliffe came from a stable background. Eddie's mother was a graphic designer and his father managed a trucking company and also taught kickboxing classes in his spare time. Eddie was a promising kickboxer and had competed at a national level. Eddie was the middle child, had a younger sister and an older brother. In school, Eddie was exceptionally smart, although somewhat socially awkward, and would fixate on girls in his class. He attended Culcheth High School with Scarlett Jenkinson. They'd been friends since the age of 11. Scarlett's mother was a teacher and her father was a builder. She was the youngest and had 3 older brothers. In her early years, Scarlett was into makeup and was social at family gatherings. But as years passed, something changed. She started to isolate herself. She didn't like many people, and people didn't like her. By the age of 12, she had started to self-harm and would joke about dead babies and send disturbing messages to classmates with phrases like "stab your nan" or "shag your cat." In 2022, Scarlett was expelled from Culcheth High for giving other children cannabis gummies. She was then accepted into Birchwood High School's separate specialist inclusion unit away from the rest of the school. But she kept in touch with Eddie through social media and messages. During this time, their conversations would turn dark. The pair began talking about unaliving a boy who was Scarlett's friend because he was getting close to a girl that Eddie liked. What I find interesting here is that the messages came across as a pair of kids trying to impress each other. It's obvious that Scarlett influenced Eddie though. Typically, one might expect that the boy would be the main influence, given the stereotypes of boys being more violent into video games and films. But that wasn't the case here. In notes found in Scarlett's room after the killing, she revealed a growing interest in Jeffrey Dahmer, Harold Shipman and Richard Ramirez. On the 5th of December 2022, Scarlett sent Eddie a link to a website that has live videos of torture and murder. These are known as Red Rooms and require a Tor browser to access them. This is also known as the dark web. Brianna was a trans girl who transitioned 2 years earlier at the age of 14, and her parents supported her throughout. She started a TikTok channel and gained herself 31,000 followers. While appearing confident in her videos, in real life she suffered from anxiety. This led her to join the inclusion unit at Birchwood High School, where she met Scarlett.
In November, Scarlett came here on a managed transfer from another school. She was here for about 10 weeks. And then it was probably in about December time that we were aware that Brianna and Scarlett's paths crossed when they were in the inclusion room, which is where Brianna spent her time within school. There was always a member of staff in there. And Scarlett used to go in for a couple of hours a week because we couldn't always match. Well, we couldn't match her timetable exactly the way it had been at a previous school. So she had some time in there to do self-study with a member of staff there as well. So we were aware that their paths had crossed.
She even told Eddie about Brianna, but straight away Eddie showed a disliking to the idea of Brianna being trans and referred to her as it. By late 2022, Scarlett and Eddie had compiled a kill list. This list included a boy referred to as a nonce, a boy who had told teachers Scarlett had been taking LSD and pills, and 2 others who had been nasty to her boyfriend. The 5th was Brianna. They even detailed on how they would carry out the attacks. In January 2023, Scarlett tried to set up a boy using Instagram, but he didn't respond and ended up blocking her. Their focus then shifted onto Brianna. She was vulnerable, much more easily manipulated, and to be quite honest, probably an easy target for the pair. 2 weeks prior to the attack, they tried to set Brianna up. They had talked about keywords that they would be used to initiate the attack and the kind of weapon that they would use. A knife they referred to in these messages was a hunting knife that Eddie's dad had purchased for him on a skiing holiday in Bulgaria. Eddie's dad trusted his son with the knife. Believing Eddie was disciplined as a kickboxer, his dad couldn't have been any more wrong. Brianna contacted Scarlett just before this attempt to say that she couldn't make it due to a family meal. This delayed the meeting for another 2 weeks as Eddie was preparing for his GCSE mock exams. Scarlett had actually put together an itinerary of how the meet would go down and gave it to Eddie. A couple of days before the murder, they had a conversation. Scarlett was excited and motivated, where Eddie showed a disinterest. But unfortunately, as the new date loomed, he got back on board with things. On Saturday, February the 11th, 2023, Brianna left home feeling very anxious about the meeting with Scarlett. While on the bus, she actually texted her mum to let her know that she felt uncomfortable just being out. Her mum encouraged her and was proud that she'd even left the house. These would actually be the last text messages they would share with each other. When Brianna got off the bus, she met up with Scarlett. Eddie hid away slightly, but then joined them as they walked towards Linear Park in Culture. Scarlett had lured Brianna there with the promise of drugs to ease her anxiety, but Scarlett had no intention of getting these drugs and was speaking to herself on a fake Snapchat account to trick Brianna into going further down the path with her and Eddie. Now, Brianna didn't take the bait. She'd actually realised that something wasn't quite right with what Scarlett was telling her, and she decided to stay well away from the track that they were trying to lead her down. But unfortunately, this wasn't enough to deter the pair from viciously attacking Brianna. It's unclear exactly how the attack went down, but 2 dog walkers, Catherine and Andrew Vyers, saw a young man leaning over in a strange way further up the path. At first they thought he was tending to his dog's leash, but as they drew closer, Scarlett and Eddie noticed them and ran off into a field. As Catherine and Andrew approached Brianna, they realised the reality of the situation. Scarlett stopped running, turned back and stared at Catherine for a few moments before running off again. Catherine called emergency services while Andrew tended to Brianna, ensuring that she would be okay and that help was on the way. But despite emergency services arriving within just a few minutes, Brianna's injuries were too severe. It later transpired that she had over 28 injuries. Eddie jumped on a bus and Scarlett walked home, and during this period she sent messages to Brianna's phone to back up her false narrative. On arriving home, Scarlett's brother told her there'd been an attack on a young girl in Linear Park, and she played dumb. Scarlett then messaged Eddie to ensure that they had the story straight. Eddie told her they would probably get caught for what they'd done, to which Scarlett replied that the police were rubbish around there. Speaking with her mum later in the evening, Scarlett actually told her mum that Brianna was with her and that Brianna had run off with a guy from Manchester. Scarlett's mum immediately got on the phone to the police and got Scarlett to tell the police what she'd told her. But with Catherine and Andrew both giving witness accounts of a girl and a boy running away from the scene, the police put 2 and 2 together and went round and arrested Scarlett and Eddie straight away.
You Eddie?
Yeah.
Eddie, you're locked up suspicion of murder, alright? You didn't have to say anything, but you may harm you eventually when questioned. So you later line in court, and if you do say evidence, do you understand?
Yeah. Let's just unlock these. I can't explain it.
No, listen.
Right, listen.
Do it all on interview, alright?
Yeah.
You're going to take it to the wrong corner, you'll be interviewed about it, they'll ask you questions, alright?
Obviously you are under caution, so anything you say is getting recorded. Okay.
What if me being suspect is because like I was the last person at scene, or like how come I'm suspect?
Pardon?
Like, how come I'm a suspect?
How come you're a suspect?
Is it because I'm the last person at scene, or is it?
I don't know. All the information I've received is you are a suspect. Okay.
Scarlett's version of events changed over time, proving that she couldn't be trusted. Initially, she stuck with the story that Brianna had gone off with somebody from Manchester, which then changed to her walking off to stretch her legs, and when she came back, Eddie was attacking her. Eddie told the police that he'd stepped away to urinate, and when he came back, Scarlett was actually attacking Brianna. Now, reading the case notes and kind of reading between the lines a little bit as well, I think what's really happened is Eddie has used the excuse of going to the toilet to walk away from the pair as he's prepared a blade behind a tree. Scarlett's continued to talk to Brianna, and that's when Eddie has snuck up behind Brianna to start the attack. After being arrested, Eddie decided to remain completely mute apart from speaking to his mum. While on remand, Eddie was diagnosed with autism by a doctor, although at the mild end of the spectrum. During the trial, with them both blaming each other, it was actually unclear who had actually carried out the attack. However, because of the planning involved, the proof found at Scarlett's home, and on both of their mobile phones, they were both convicted of the murder. However, they were given slightly different sentences based on the circumstances. Here's the judge giving out the sentences.
I think it is plain that this was a murder of particularly high seriousness, and that the part each of you played leads to the starting point of 20 years. Looking at aggravating factors, Brianna's murder involved a significant degree of planning and premeditation, with more general plans to kill other people. The planning started with you, Scarlett, and it was you who brought Eddie in. But Eddie, you joined in with the planning. I do bear in mind that apart from the awful subject matter, the plans were in some ways quite childish. Scarlett's notebooks were left where they could easily be found. But the extent of the planning, on any view, remains a significant aggravating factor for each of you. In your case, Scarlett, I have to bear in mind that you tried to kill Brianna by poisoning her. Although that does not apply to you, Eddie, you did encourage further attempts at poisoning, although that did not happen. Both of you were involved in the failed attempt to kill Brianna on the 28th of January and persisted when that did not come off. Brianna was vulnerable, as described by her family, even if not strictly to be treated as vulnerability in the statutory sense. You picked Brianna because you both thought she would be an easy target. In doing so, you, Scarlett, abused her trust. She thought you were her friend. You encouraged her not to be anxious and guided her through getting the bus. Eddie, you knew Scarlett was preying on Brianna in this way, and so it aggravates your offending too, although perhaps to a lesser degree than Scarlett's. Although I have taken the same starting point, I have concluded that the final minimum terms must be different. In Scarlett's case, the aggravating features are significant and would have led to a substantial uplift to the starting point, but for the mitigation, particularly that relating to maturity and mental disorder. There must still be an uplift, but it will be moderated. In Eddie's case, I find that the balance to be struck between aggravating factors, which are not quite as high as in Scarlett's case, and the mitigation I have identified is such as to cancel each other out. In saying that, I have taken account of all the medical evidence and accept the diagnosis of ASD has some impact, but the extent to which it reduced your culpability in the circumstances of this offending is limited. The parole board will have to decide if and when either or both of you can be released. That will only happen if you no longer pose a danger. If you are released, you will remain on licence for life and you may be recalled to prison. I will now sentence each of you. You may remain seated. In both cases, the relevant statutory surcharge will apply. Scarlett Jenkinson, for the murder of Brianna Ghey, you will be detained at His Majesty's pleasure. I set the minimum term at 22 years, less the 352 days that you have spent on remand. Eddie Radcliffe, for the murder of Brianna Ghey, you will be detained at His Majesty's pleasure. I set the minimum term at 20 years, less the 352 days that you have spent on remand. Please take the defendants to the cells and their legal teams will come and see them before they go to begin their sentences. Thank you.
Now this case is a heavy one, and my heart goes out to Brianna, her family, and actually all the lives that have been affected by Scarlett and Eddie's actions. Esther Jai, who's Brianna's mum, has been campaigning recently to put more stringent laws around mobile phones to protect children. She's been to Parliament, and she's also met with one of Brianna's attackers' parents, who fully supports Esther's efforts. I just think this shows remarkable bravery on the part of both of these parents. These two teens are going to go down in history, and it's likely if they ever do get released, they'll be given new identities to protect them from the public, because this case isn't going to be forgotten anytime soon. Thank you for dropping in today to check out my coverage on this case. Remember as well to take care out there, and I'll see you in the next one.